So welcome to all. My name is Stineke Oenema. I'm the coordinator of the UN System Standing Committee on Nutrition. Welcome to this nutrition webinar about digital solutions for nutrition-sensitive programming. This one is the fourth one in our series, Nutrition in a Digital World. While I recognize that some participants are still joining, I suggest we already start our webinar also to keep the maximum of our limited time. Before we actually start the webinar, please, maybe you're used to them already, but let me give you a list of our housekeeping rules, the practical information. Please be informed that we are recording this webinar and the recordings will be made available on our website afterwards. Unfortunately, we can only do this meeting in English. And please, if you would like to share your questions regarding the topic of the webinar, please use the Q&A function, the question and answering function. If you would like to make a comment, including questions or concerns related to the Zoom function itself, you can submit it to the chat box. So as said, this is the fourth webinar in a series of 4. So allow me to quickly give a very brief summary of what happened in webinar number 3. In that one, we focused on digital solutions for data-driven decision-making to help improve nutrition of vulnerable groups and to address inequalities. In that one, panelists presented examples of the use and potential of digital technologies to improve food security, monitor community health and nutrition status, tackle food security through food salvaging, supporting quality nutrition care for children, and transforming nutrition goals into nutrition rights. Today, we will continue and we will wrap up our series by examining the potential of digital solutions for nutrition-sensitive programming. And also, we will link back this series of webinar and the topic of nutrition in a digital world to FPO work regarding a digital platform for international agriculture. We will come back to that topic later on. So back to this webinar. We have a great lineup of speakers again. Today we have from WFP, Raoul Sainz, from FAO, we have Bin Liu and George Rapsomanikis, and from Harvest Plus we have Jenny Bolton, and finally we have Dr. Susan Kino from Moi University in Moi University in Kenya. And of course, we will also be looking forward to engaging with you through the Q&A function and having a little bit of a debate with you and among the speakers. Of course, it's going to be a friendly debate. But without further ado, I'd like to give the floor with our panelist, Raoul Sainz from WFP, who will present on the Plus School Meal Program. Raoul, you have the floor for about 10 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, Stineke, and thank you everyone for being here today. Very excited to talk to you about Plus School menus, the future of menu design. But first, let's talk about a concern, a global problem. We estimated 73 million children, the amount of children that are out of school feeding and extreme need, and extreme poverty. So this is a huge gap that countries need to close in order to increase their human capital in the future. And at the same time, there's an estimated global investment of over $40 billion every single year. So we have a huge investment, and at the same time, we still have a huge gap that we need to close. And closing this gap is the main target that we have in WFP school feeding for the next 10 years. The huge majority of this investment, of this $40 billion yearly, is going into food purchases. We decide what to buy based on menus, and those menus are created using mostly manual methods or some sort of digitally supported, but mostly based on trial and error. And it's difficult. I need to see if I need 10 more grams of rice or 5 more grams of beans. How much would that cost? How would that affect the iron intake? Can I buy this locally? Do I have to buy international products to cover this demand for my school feeding, etc.? So there are trillions and trillions and trillions of possible combinations that is virtually impossible to calculate with a human brain. And on the other hand, that causes that every single cent can be different. We can buy this, we can buy that from this place, from this other place. Every cent counts if we want to leave no one behind. Every cent can make a difference. And depending on what we buy, we will have a different budget, and that budget will determine how many children can we buy, how nutritious can the meal be, how local can those meals be. So what we propose is, it seems a simple solution at the first sight, which is substitute this manual calculation with digital computing. So we have all these trillions and trillions of combinations that, as we said, manually is virtually impossible to do. So let's let an algorithm to calculate an optimal menu. That, of course, that menu has to be crafted to my program, crafted to my country of operation. And that's where the difficult part comes, because there are too many variables and there are too many opportunities that might be lost. At the end, we want to have certain conditions at the minimum cost. And on top of that, we need to make all of these palatable, something simple to use, something that will allow anybody anywhere to craft the menu using this digital solution. And that was how Plus School Menus was born. So what is it? It's a web-based and open software that it allows integral optimization of school menus. When we said integral, we're talking about the cost, we're talking about the nutritional value, we're talking about where the food comes from, and also about respecting local eating habits in the community in which those menus are implemented. And all of this has to be taken into account simultaneously by this algorithm. And as an outcome, we have what we call an integrally optimal menu. So what are the main features of Plus? When we were designing the project, there were three main points that we wanted to focus about. The first and the easiest one to understand, it has to be easy to use. So there is no point on making a tool that is extremely complicated and in the end, nobody can access to it, because we have too many countries, too many actors, and all of them should be able to craft their menus as easily as possible. The second, it has to be something impactful. We need to leverage the power of this algorithm to really create a difference. And lastly, we need something that is free to use, and anybody, as we said, anywhere can access to it. So about easy usage, we invested over 6 months. We interviewed people in more than 20 countries about how do they create menus nowadays. And we're trying to get those lessons learned to adapt the interface, to adapt the usage of this tool to what is already done, to be as close to the current reality as possible. So in the end, we ended up with an interface that in 4 steps will allow you to calculate their optimal menu. So it's a process that takes, with a bit of practice, less than a minute. And we estimate in about 2 hours the amount of time that any potential user needs to invest in learning how to use this tool. All materials are embedded online within the tool, so you can learn on the go as you practice, as you take the different steps. There are videos, frequently asked questions, etc. And what we were trying to do is to avoid workshops, to avoid lengthy training processes that will really challenge the expansion of the tool. And talking about impact, this is a very young project. We only implemented Plus design menus in 1 country, which is Bhutan. During the pilot, we crafted a menu that was 20% cheaper than the current one, but equally nutritious. So this means we can feed 20% more children with the same amount of money. And that happened virtually overnight. You just changed the shopping list. Instead of buying tomatoes here, buy maize in this other place and in this amount, and so on. We're not changing anything. We're not changing the basis of the program in this case. We're just calculating the best option with an algorithm instead with a limited human brain or limited manual method. But it wasn't all. At the same time, we managed to increase by 70% the contribution of smallholder farmers to the meal. So we're substituting international procured food by smallholder farmer procured food, maintaining the nutritional value, and at the same time, reducing the cost by 20%. And again, this just comes by an algorithm. There is no magic here. It's just the algorithm sees option and can calculate options that we cannot. And lastly, the free to use and worldwide access feature. It's 0%, $0 cost to governments. It's just accessible from any browser. You just type the address, you get into the tool, register, free to use forever. That's it. We just want to substitute these manual methods that are currently the trend in menu creation into Plus School menus. So why would I want to use this tool? Two main points here to take into consideration. The first and the most obvious one is program design and implementation. This is an example of Bhutan. So I have a program, I have a menu, I want to make it cheaper so I can afford more children within my program with the same budget, or I want to increase the local procurement, or I want to increase the nutritional value to tackle local deficiencies, you name it. It's just a matter of substituting current methods of menu creation, but this method, which is more accurate and of course faster. But there is a second point here that we're discovering now, and seems some countries are quite interested into exploring, which is advocacy and policy development. So in a few minutes, we can create different scenarios about how would the program look like if I want to substitute international procurement fully to make it fully local, if I want to reach the nutritional value that I would like to cover, to cover certain deficiencies, etc. So in an afternoon, I can create different scenarios and I can find out things that, like if I increase the budget by 3%, I could substitute any international procured food by local procured food, or I can change the menu in this and this way, so the nutritional intake will increase in this percent, etc. And that helps a lot when we are talking about competing priorities in a national budget. Let's say with this tiny increase or with this change within the program, we are able to generate ABC. What is the way forward? The key point moving forward is partnership. So we joined forces with the Partnership for Child Development. It's an organization linked to the Imperial College, has a very long experience with the menu planner tool, mostly around homegrown programs, and they have been extremely engaged in how to integrate community into menu planning decision. So we believe like joining their experience with this technology would be indeed a very exciting way forward. And this is something that will be formalized in the coming weeks, but very happy to announce this. I'm very happy to see what's next. And on the other hand, we have been talking with FAO for a number of months now. We're looking into collaboration about nutritional guideline creation for school feeding. And yeah, still under discussion, but this is something that should come in the coming months. In terms of reach, our long-term goal is that any single program in lower and middle income countries worldwide is designed, the menus are designed using Plus, because that will allow cheaper menus, more nutritious and more local than using manual creation methods. And one point we're particularly excited about is the World Expo. We won the Global Best Practice Program Award for the World Expo Dubai 2020 last year. And that allowed us to showcase the project during the event that was postponed by 1 year for obvious COVID reasons. It's still to be determined, but it seems in March 2022, we'll be showcasing in the UN Pavilion. So if you happen to be in Dubai at that time, pass by, we'll have a tea together. We couldn't finish without thanking our partners, the Innovation Accelerator and Sodexo Stop Hunger Foundation. They have been funding us and giving us technical advice from the very, very beginning of this project when it was nothing more than an idea. So without them, that wouldn't have been possible. Also to PCD and FAO, that will be key on the way forward. They're already shaping this tool in the right direction with their technical support and expertise. So that was everything from my side. Very happy to share this experience with you, the problem that we have in school feeding, and one of the proposed solutions we are trying to close that 73 million gap. Feel free to contact, feel free to check our website and the tool itself. If you have any question, any comment, we are very happy to discuss. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Raul. I really, really appreciated your presentation, setting out the challenges, very clear how complicated it can be to make all these calculations, and then presenting the School Plus feature. I mean, you said it's easy, it's impactful, and it's free. It's open access. So I call that win-win-win, triple win. So that's really interesting, and I was very interested by your link with advocacy and policy development as well. So congratulations with this tool. But now I'd like to go to FAO. You already mentioned FAO as a partner. Bin Liu, Nutrition and Food System Officer in FAO, will now speak about digital solutions for nutrition-sensitive small, medium enterprises transformation. Bin, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. And as you can see in the title slide, and this is a small literature review on what we think might be helpful, what digital solutions might be helpful to help SME transformation, to help them, to promote them to produce more nutrition-sensitive food. And this is in collaboration with other colleagues. So, well, at first I want to reiterate the Global Nutrition Challenge, and you all know this very well. These multiple forms of malnutrition can even coexist in one single person. For example, like one person can be both obese and has malnutrition, micronutrient deficiency. So this is a great challenge to all of us. But it has been shown that this global malnutrition pandemic is mostly caused by poor diet. So improving diet, shifting the trend towards healthy diets might be the most basic, most fundamental solution to this. And for this, I will show to you a comparison between what is not a healthy diet and what is a healthy diet. So on the left, you have a diet that is compromised all by ultra-processed food. And on the right is minimally processed or unprocessed food. So there are two sides of the problem. The first is that the ultra-processed diets often have higher calories and lower amounts of micronutrients. And this, I'm sure you're all very familiar with. But on the other hand, even the diets and the nutrients are matched for the ultra-processed diet and the minimally processed diet. People tend to eat more in ultra-processed diets than in minimally processed diets. And so this is something interesting. So there could be something in the procedure of processing that makes this food much easier to be digested, but it will cause us to intake excessive calories and nutrients. So how do we shift, how do we leverage SMEs in this? Why SME play an important role in shaping our diet? That is because SME, like this statistics here, the small and medium farms produce most of the food consumed worldwide, mainly these categories. And if you look at these categories, that is the staples and plant-based nutritious food. And in recent papers, reports, you all agree that these are the fundamentals for the healthy diet. So SMEs provides most of the foods that are needed for the healthy diet. But also SMEs plays important role also in processing, but I don't have the exact number in processing now. But for retailing, you can say that in developing countries, nearly 70 to 100% food is sold through SME channels. So we can establish the case that SME can play an important role in shaping the consumer's diet. So we need to understanding why SME are not so motivated to produce nutritious food. So FAO has this project is called Strengthening Capacities for Nutrition-Sensitive Food Systems through a multi-stakeholder approach. It is in 3 countries, Ghana, Kenya, and Vietnam. And one of the major goals, one of the major outputs is to strengthen the capacities of universities and SMEs to promote nutrition-sensitive food. So we have a stakeholder workshop in 2019, and the country participants suggest the following challenges that SMEs are facing, like all these challenges: infrastructure, policy, finance, technology, knowledge, nutrition awareness, and so on. And we identify these challenges that can be solved by digital solutions, that digital technologies could help to alleviate the challenge in some way for SMEs. So we write some of the examples that we find, and some of them are done by FAO, but some of them are not. We wrote them in our paper. So I will go them roughly one by one. So for the first is finance. And for finance, I would like to draw your attention to this report done by African Finance Alliance. And I think it's an organization that has done a lot of projects in Africa for digitalization of finance. So in this report, there are cases in Kenya, Tanzania, Senegal, and Mozambique. So in these countries, there are mobile applications for loan application and processing and personal and business banking. Maybe these are common in developed countries, but in these countries, they are quite new, quite novel. And people have been helped a lot by them. Not only they have effects for users, but they have also, they have some demands so that the government needs to make some shift towards digitalization, like digital ID, digital national ID, and also biometrics collection. And also this report reports the constraints that the products are facing. Well, it's the same thing, but one thing particularly draws my attention is the third one, that is the revenue sharing, because some banks, they choose to partner with mobile network operators. I remember in Kenya, in Eastern Africa, that is a huge mobile operator called Safaricom. I think it's very common, so that they can use the phone alone to transfer money, even without a bank account. But how to share the revenue between the bank and the mobile network operators, that is a problem that needs to be solved. And the second one is the raw material supplies. And for this, I would like to draw your attention to blockchain. And you all know that blockchain is a tool. It can be seen as a tool that can help to tracing a product back to each point in the value chain. And for this, I would like to draw your attention to two reports. The first one is done by WWF, the Worldwide Wildlife Foundation. So what they do is that they do a tuna, they create a tuna value chain that is traceable and very transparent in Fiji, and using one of the blockchain platforms. And second, not only blockchain can be used to track the food itself, also envisage that in the future, blockchain can be traced into the traced ingredients of the food. So once we have this food and we have the blockchain, and everything what this food is made of is recorded on that blockchain. So by using this, we can easily tell the nutritional quality and but the nutritional quality of this food. But the biggest problem is that well, the information needs to be collected first. So, well, I don't know. This is only one of my suggestions to further advance the use of blockchain in contribution to nutrition. And third one is knowledge capacity and awareness. So FAO has done itself and with a few partners by creating digital platforms and digital incubators, accelerators, and labs. And in 2018, FAO held a hackathon in Africa, especially in Rwanda, that is that gathers a lot of young, passionate programmers to provide digital smart solutions for food challenges. And this picture is showcasing the FAO e-learning academy. It's recently, I think it's launched very early in this year. That is a hub for gathering all the courses that has been developed and being developed by FAO. And in this project, we have a course that will be released next year, helping SMEs to produce the nutritious food and try to teach them how to make more profit by producing nutritious food. And the third one, there are e-commerce platforms that are springing up everywhere in the developing countries. One of them worth notifying is Trigger Food in Kenya. The second one is Pinduoduo in China. And Pinduoduo is interesting because it is a mobile specific platform. You cannot access it in a computer. So this is very specific, tailor-made for China, because many farmers, like in other countries, they don't have a computer, they just have a phone, and that is their only way to access internet. And well, in the last slide, I would like to talk about some uncertainties about digital technologies. I think this has been discussed somewhat in previous webinars, but I want to discuss it again. First, of course, we know that hurdles in infrastructure and regulatory frameworks. And second, I want to say that the technologies themselves are not a panacea. There are always things that technology cannot do, and we still need to find a way to. We of course need to rely on the technologies to innovate, but there are still something that we need to be done by ourselves in other ways. And the third one is data ownership. As I've seen in some examples, like the data on the soil, on the earth and field that farmers own and farmers grow on, they are collected and uploaded to the cloud, and so farmers can access them. That's very nice, but the problem is that farmers, they may need to pay to access them. But these data are actually generated by farmers themselves, so it's a bit somewhat unfair and unjust to charge farmers very much to use this data. And the fourth one is, I call it the creative destruction of innovation. And we have seen that in history, that every innovation causes jobs to disappear. Of course, there's new jobs to appear, but usually the new jobs are not reserved for the job losers at all. And in this aspect, I would like to bring in the gender perspective. That is, we really need to protect the rights of women in this transitioning process, so that they will not be the victims, but we should make them the beneficiaries of the digital transformation. And the last one is that the agri-food sector is very much cultural. They are habits. They are much more ingrained in our brain and in our everyday behavior, much more ingrained than we have thought. So if the ultimate goal is to change people's diets, the people's thinking about diets, and that will incur behavior change, and that is always very challenging. But we have seen behavior change in some long-term studies, and I hope digital transformation can prove itself to be a very powerful catalyst in this process. So this is my presentation, and thank you very much. And you are very welcome to visit Nutrition and Innovation, these links of FAO. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Bin-Liu, for this very, very good and very interesting presentation again. Particularly, thank you for bringing back to the basics. We are definitely living in a digital world, but what we are working for in the end is to try and achieve a shift to healthy diets, or at least diets that are more healthy than they are at the moment. Regarding the SMEs, the small medium enterprises, once I heard someone say those are the front runners for nutrition. So the points you made are very, very relevant. And of course, there are so many challenges in the finance, the supplies, and the knowledge, and the digital technologies are there to help out, with, of course, taking into account the hurdles you mentioned. And you ended up again with the basics. You said, what about the ownership of data? But you also mentioned it is about people and culture. So you made really a very nice round and circular presentation, starting from healthy diets and bringing it back through SMEs, the hurdles and the opportunities of digital technologies, back to people and their culture and even creativity. So thanks for that. So Jenny, I'd like to go on with you. Jenny Walton from Harvest Plus of the Food Partnership and Commercialization Division. Jenny will speak about digital solutions to promote nutritious food value chain for biofortified staples. Jenny, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm just trying to share my screen. I had it perfectly before, and now I can't seem to do it. But just as I'm looking to do that, my name is Jenny Walton. I work for Harvest Plus, and I'm a pleasure to be here today and present the work on behalf of Harvest Plus, because this is really what I will present is across the teams, and also on behalf of the co-author of the paper.
If you wish, Jenny, we can share the screen for you. You just need to indicate when to move to the next slide. Just tell me if that's needed.
Oh, there we go. I got it now.
Perfect. Yes, we can see it.
So
if you can put it to full screen, please. Yes, yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Got there eventually. So what I'd like to cover in the next 10 minutes is just to give you the context of what biofortification is, and then how we deliver biofortification, so the seeds, the grains and the foods to farmers and consumers, and then how we use digital solutions to build scale and expand reach with a few examples of what we're currently doing across the value chain. So biofortification. So another word for this is nutrient enriched crops, and it is a process of increasing the vitamin and mineral content of a crop through conventional breeding or agronomic practices, so that when the crops are consumed regularly, they will generate a measurable improvement in vitamin and mineral status and health outcomes. And within the Harvest Plus program, we only use varieties that are through conventional plant breeding, and it's not from genetic modification. Why this biofortification is so important, when you see globally that 60% of calorie consumption is from staple crops, so the cheap basic staples, so wheat, rice, maize, pearl millet, cassava, those kind of things. And currently the nutrient delivery of those foods is so low that is one reason why we are seeing the problems with hidden hunger on a global scale, and why 1 in 4 people is suffering from hidden hunger. And as the data is now telling us, that because of COVID, more people are going to be more reliant on the cheap basic staples of the food supply chain. So really, it's never been so important to put some more energy and effort into the nutrient content of the basic foods we consume. So these are the crops that we work on, and Harvest Plus is part of IFPRI, and we're part of the wider CG system. So all of the crop development is housed within the CG system. So these are the general main staples that the world's consumers are eating, and at the moment over 42 million people are benefiting from the consumption of nutrient enriched crops throughout the world. And importantly, it works, and certainly don't go into the evidence today because that's not what we're all here about, but it's one thing to actually breed the nutrients into the staple crops that people are consuming, but it's another thing to actually get those crops to the consumer's hands and the different consumption points across the value chain. So to actually get the crops to the consumers, to the end consumers, we have a total value chain approach at Harvest Plus to actually deliver them to people. So from everything from agricultural research to food processing and retailing, and we do have a digital solution at every step in this value chain. And the environment that we're working at the moment with COVID has really accelerated our efforts in utilising in digital technology, because we can't see each other and talk to each other like we used to. So the first example of what I want to talk about is really quite basic in terms of a digital solution. But one thing that we know is holding back the scale of nutrient-enriched crops, and the scale of scaling biofortification is the lack of standards. So how do you tell the difference between zinc wheat and just the normal wheat? And we know that we need a published nutrient threshold to actually that the food value chain actors can actually stick to, and to actually use, and then importantly how you actually procure against those standards. So no standards there at grain level. So we have through the GAIN partnership in the commercialization of biofortified crops, we are establishing these standards, and normally these standards take years to complete, with extensive global travel, with global leaders meeting up 3 times per year, and then the stakeholder engagement, and then the immense printing of paper copies and disseminating them. But this one is being done completely virtually, not only from a stakeholder perspective and the actual the working group pulling this all together, but the standard itself will remain digital, and the dissemination of which will remain digital and completely online, and how we disseminate that through the countries. But just a really simple way of how we are using like digital technologies available to us, but also coping in the current climate we're dealing with. Digital marketplaces are just the future, and I think for those of us living in countries like the UK or America, we're just so used to pressing a button and something arriving at the door the next day. Whereas for sort of agri-food value chains, that's quite a different case, especially in sort of low and middle income countries, which online purchasing are largely held back because of the infrastructure of delivery. So 2 examples where we're looking at online purchase for supply chain members. So not only can you buy, if you're a farmer, you can buy your seeds on an Amazon type mechanism, but if you're a consumer, you can also buy the food through either a supermarket or other sort of online trading. And again, through our GAIN partnership, we're using India as the pilot country to either develop a new platform or work with the best existing ones. I'm hoping to roll that out specifically for all of our value chains in different countries. But also another example in Uganda, where we have mobile-based apps for food trade. So we see this as a huge opportunity for growth and expansion of consumption of biofortified foods. Another example in Nigeria is what we have called BiofortStat, and this is more of an online database that links people together, but more from like a monitoring and evaluation perspective, but linking sort of farmers to planting material, and monitoring the amount of people who actually farmers are engaged in the program, and helps with our M&E activities on a much wider scale. Then another example, promotions to farmers. So how you create demand from farmers to actually buy the seeds to start growing biofortified crops is one of our core competencies of showing farmers that a market exists for these foods, but also talking to them about the agricultural traits of the crops. And then traditionally we would do this with like face-to-face meetings of community meetings, or larger sort of farmer get-togethers. And I know fascinating story of my boss showing me photographs where he was in Pakistan of a farmer meeting with 7,000 farmers in one room, and telling them about biofortified zinc wheat and why it's important and where you can get it from. So they're gone are those days where we can have 7,000 people in one room. So we've moved now to digital promotions, and with our partner Precision Agriculture for Development. So this project is currently active now, where we're talking to 100,000 Pakistani farmers through text messages, and providing them with a mobile helpline if they want to ring up to find out more about where to buy the seeds, and also any questions they might have. This has been approved through the government of Pakistan, not only in the way that we do this, but also the actual the messages that we're providing to farmers. So all aspects, from the sort of health benefits and dangers of zinc deficiency to actually where farmers can sell their surplus to the market. We see this as a pilot, even though this is massive numbers, but we hope to see this as the future of how we talk to farmers. Mobile phone use at the moment in Pakistan is around 47%, but that's increasing on a daily basis rapidly. You don't need a smartphone for this. But what we also know is that if for those that don't have access to a mobile phone, they know somebody who does, and we're also targeting sort of the influential people in the village and the thought leaders of the community who will disseminate the messages that they receive through their mobile phone. And then final example of another thing that's critically important to building biofortified value chains is supply chain integrity. So if there's a difference in the colour, so if it's orange maize, you can actually see a difference, but if it's something like zinc wheat versus standard wheat, you can't tell the difference. And it's not only just sort of seeing the difference, but we have to be able to trace that certified and genuine biofortified seed all the way from seed production to growing and production into the consumer's hands, so that consumers know what they're getting, but also how we can manage other issues such as aflatoxin contamination. So where is it happening in the value chain? We can do monitoring and evaluation, so we can really see at the touch of a button how many seeds we're selling, how many farmers are growing, how many consumers are consuming. So we really do see this as our future, and this is at the moment a pilot idea. You know, vitamin A deficiency costs Nigeria 183 million a year annually because of complications with night blindness and impaired immunity. And this can be alleviated quite quickly if everybody in Nigeria switched over to the vitamin A variety. We would see a massive impact on not only health outcomes but economic impact. So establishing what the barriers to scale are and actually working with partners who know what they're doing in blockchain and the supply chain integrity is absolutely essential. We're looking for a sponsorship and donors to carry out the pilot as soon as possible, with the full idea to roll out and digitize the entire orange maize supply chain in Nigeria. So just to sum up what I've shown today and the paper. So digital tools are essential to Harvest Plus. We can't do what we do on a daily basis without them, and we're certainly not going to get to our target of 1 billion consumers by 2030. The really basic stuff can be overlooked. The fact that we're all here today in a digital world is, don't forget the basic stuff that we have and really utilize the basics to go forward. We need digital tools at every step along the value chain. It's not just about farmer product promotion or consumer promotion or supply chain integrity or standards. It's the whole thing of linking everything together and linking every actor together and doing it efficiently and monitoring and evaluating it efficiently. We really have to be prepared to take risks here. So a lot of these things aren't proven. There's a lot of skepticism still about the use of blockchain. But we have to take these risks. Innovation by definition is unproven, and working with open-minded partners and donors, we want to be able to do that thorough risk assessment, but also be prepared for failure and to learn from them and quickly adapt to the new situation. And communicate unfinished ideas. I think we all have a tendency of keeping our ideas to ourselves and worry about sharing unfinished ideas or not talking about things until it's fully funded or implemented or we know something. But if we can't have that sort of mentality when it comes to technology and innovation, and we want to do this in a really open innovation way and crowd in partners and like-minded and work with people who are solution driven and nimble and can act really quickly in the environment that we are. And we're lucky to have partners and donors to be able to do that. So everything that's I wanted to talk to you today. So thank you. Happy to have any questions.
Thanks very much, Jenny. Thank you for this rich overview and the opportunities you sketched to scale up, but also improve the quality and the monitoring of the quality of biofortified crops and how you use digital tools in there. I appreciated also how you were able to link back to the earlier presentations regarding referring to blockchain technology and also the development of specific apps to roll out the use and the access to biofortified crops. Just one highlight again, you didn't mention it in your overview, is your digital platform of experts to be able to monitor the quality and discuss. And I think that's interesting for our discussion later on, also when George will speak about the FAO digital platform. But for now, I first would like to move to our fourth speaker, Dr. Susan Commo from Moy University. Susan, you have the floor. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here to present my literature search findings on digital technology to boost agricultural outputs, improve the food environment, and to reduce malnutrition in Africa. We all know that since the UN adopted the SDGs in 2015, the food situation has been getting worse in Africa. And we see that 277 million people in Africa are severely food insecure. And poorly structured food environment compounded by insufficient agricultural output has led to food insecurity and rise in the numbers of malnourished people. And over the years, several strategies have been adopted in a bid to find solutions to rising food insecurity and to reduce the triple burden of malnutrition. And some of these strategies include the structural adjustment programs, Millennium Development Goals, and now we have SDGs. And to achieve SDGs, we find that improving performance of the food system is central. More than half of people in Africa depend on agriculture for all or part of their livelihood. And you find that almost 70% of Africans actually depend on agriculture. And ending poverty and hunger by 2030 can only be achieved by making the food system more robust, sustainable, and resilient. And this can be done by transforming the food system from a major contributor to climate change into part of the solution. So World Bank identifies the need to expand digital opportunities to everyone, including farmers, agribusiness, as a way to improve food systems and achieve the SDGs. And you find that since time immemorial, Africans are mainly dependent on indigenous knowledge and traditional ways to manage food system, especially in post-harvest handling and also predicting or forecasting weather so that they can be able to minimize losses. So looking at the history and coverage of digital solution, I know this has been covered quite a lot from the first webinar to now, but we see that Green Revolution did very little for the poor and vulnerable. But now we have a new revolution, which is actually the digital one. And it is essential that Africa be a part of it. So the new solutions that are ICT based, which include communication devices and applications are essential and they influence the most sectors of the economy. For example, we have those that influence the health and education. And more so, we have seen even during this COVID pandemic time that ICT has really played a role in interventions or use in primary and imparting knowledge in primary, secondary, and in tertiary levels of education. In 2017, the number of mobile connections was 747 million in Africa, and this translates to 75% penetration. And in some parts of Africa actually it is 100%. And evolving mobile technology has given rise to startups aimed at improving income through agribusiness, ensuring food availability and accessibility. In 2018, there were about 390 registered digital solutions, up from 41 in 2012. So some of the examples that may have been given also, maybe from the beginning of this webinar to now, that is being used in Africa, especially to improve agricultural outputs and food security, include TechnoHealth, which is an ICT-based solution to enhance early detection, timely reporting, and prompt response to health events in human and animal populations in Africa. We also have several farmers and pastoralists registered in mobile phone service providers for weather updates and market connections. In Ethiopia, we have free 8028 hotline, which is a farmer advisory service that has been instrumental in aligning services to local circumstances, and we have 4 million subscribers, and it uses the local language in communication. In Ghana, we have Farmerline and Agro Center use mobile and web technologies to disseminate farmer advice, weather forecast, and market information, and financial tips to farmers who are traditionally out of reach to connectivity. Here in Kenya, we have Kenya Agricultural Observatory platform, which was developed by KALRO, which is the Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization in Kenya, and it provides real-time and historical records of relevant weather variables, including short-term weather, forecast by county farmers, and can start so that they can start planting on time and avoid losses. We also have Farm Drive, which is also a Kenyan enterprise that connects unbanked and underserved smallholder farmers to credit, while helping financial institutions cost effectively increase their agricultural loan portfolios. Others include Ujuzi Kilimo, which is also a Kenyan based, which uses big data to bring farmers together in a knowledge-based community. GeoFarmer, which also was tested in Ghana and Tanzania, provide real-time, near real-time two-way data flows that can be used to monitor agricultural production systems with interactive feedback between users. We also have M-Pesa, and I'm glad that one of my colleagues talked about this, which was developed by Safaricom and Vodafone, which allows traders and farmers and consumers as well to transfer money and pay for services and goods. M-Shwari is also a Kenyan-based M-Pesa service, which is a microfinance facility, allows farmers to access credits and pay back with minimal interest, and they can also use this facility as a saving facility. Kilimo Salama, which translates to Save Agriculture in Swahili, provides crop insurance to farmers using also M-Pesa. And we have Soko Hewani, Soko Shambani, which also aim at linking farmers to markets and other services. So how can digital technologies improve food environments and reduce malnutrition? I have 3 pointers or take-home message here that we can think about and ponder about. So digital technology need to improve production of nutritious crops for dietary diversity. And nutritious food need to be available, accessible, affordable, and acceptable. And also we find that direct nutrition interventions need to be scaled up. Okay, we have all these digital interventions or startups that have come up, but they need to be scaled up for them to be able to be effective. And some of them include Evisurveyor and mHealth app, which was developed by the Ministry of Health in Senegal, partnering with WHO that collects routine maternal health data. And we also see that improving nutrition outcomes require building capacity of nutrition specialists across Africa using digital technology, because what is lacking really in Africa is the capacity or personnel to manage a nutrition program or to implement intervention programs. And examples include the Nutrition Society, which founded the E-Nutrition Academy, and this facilitates shared learning and also build capacity. We have e-library of evidence for nutrition action, ELENA, which lists nutrition interventions to help countries implement as well as scale up. In conclusion, digital innovations and technologies may be part of the solution to bring transformation of agri-food system. And digital solutions for agriculture are important if Africa is to feed itself in 2050. Several digital startups and innovations have demonstrated a measurable impact in improving this, and this needs to be quantified. From all the startups and all the innovations that we have seen, we need to quantify and see how big an impact all of them are making in terms of improving output in agriculture. We also see that digital technology can also help close the gap, the gender gap in agriculture, because women now can borrow without having to need a collateral or open a bank account. And we need to attract the youth back to farming, because that is the majority of the population now. And if the youth can go back into farming, we can improve our agricultural output. Increase in agricultural production alone will not lead to better food environment and to reduce malnutrition, unless specific focus on nutritional outcome is built in agri-food related technologies. And more so, there is need for scale up of direct nutrition interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan, for this excellent overview of the several digital tools and technologies that are being used and have been used so far in Africa. Now there is big potential to improve agriculture output. I particularly wanted to highlight as well one of your last points that you said digital technologies can also bring back youth into agriculture. I mean, it's an enormously important point to make and to keep in mind. So thanks for making that point. Another one you said, and people tend to forget it over and over again, and you mentioned it clearly. You said agriculture is important for healthy diets, but then you also mentioned we need to link it to health. And you gave excellent examples of how e-health tools can be very helpful there. So thanks for that. The last point I wanted to highlight before I hand over to George is that you said, okay, capacity building is interesting. And there are actually e-platforms that will help exchange knowledge and help learning. And that's also something our previous speaker said. There is this digital platform to track quality. So you can have digital platform for tracking quality, setting standards, to learn, to exchange information. So having said this, I'm trying to build a bridge, you will notice that, to our last speaker today from FAO, who will speak about the FAO digital platform, the international platform for digital food and agriculture. George, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. And after that, of course, the floor will be open for Q&A from other people.
Thank you very much, Stine, again. Many thanks for inviting me to the fourth and final webinar episode of this series. Let me share my screen with you. I think what comes out from the whole webinar series up to now is that we cannot separate our work for achieving the SDGs, and in this particular point, nutrition, better nutrition, from digital technologies. So my topic today is about international digital cooperation in food and agriculture. And I will link it to the initiative we try to establish in Rome together with the RBAs, OECD, the World Bank, and other international organizations, the International Platform for Digital Food and Agriculture, which I presented in the first episode of this series. Now, just a quick recap, a quick reminder. The platform is a voluntary and inclusive multi-stakeholder forum, and that will deal with digital technology applications on food and agriculture and will strengthen cooperation. It is voluntary, it is inclusive, it will include governments, farmers, business, NGOs, academia, the big tech technology companies and smaller companies, and international organizations. It is all about international cooperation to support governance. And when I talk about governance, I mean advocacy instruments, recommendations, best practices, and voluntary guidelines to support policymakers in developing programs. This is the objective. We want to support through these advocacy instruments an enabling environment that will maximize the potential of digital technologies for development, but at the same time, it will try to address challenges and the underlying risks. And this is very important for us. Since I presented the idea of the platform last November in the first webinar, in FAO, we organized a high-level dialogue. That was on the 3rd of December, on how this platform will add to the governance of digital technologies in food and agriculture. We had a minister from Norway, the Minister for Regional Policies, Nikolai Astrup. He used to be Minister for Digital Technologies and a member of the high-level panel of experts on digital cooperation that was formed by the United Nations Secretary General. We had ITU. We also invited the big tech, Microsoft and IBM. We had non-governmental organizations, the farmers, and academia. The discussion was extremely interesting and quite rich. And I have summarized the key takeaways on these slides. The first one is that we need a multi-stakeholder approach. And it was underlined that in the United Nations, we have a roadmap for digital cooperation, but also the high level of experts on digital cooperation. As digital technologies affect all sectors and countries and the society as a whole, we're all closely interconnected, so we have to strengthen collaboration and synergies, exchange views to build trust. At the same time, we lack entry points for developing countries, the smallholder farmers, small and medium-sized exercises, and the marginalized groups. So we have to bridge this gap. The second point was related to governance, which is key to the implementation of digital technologies and very central in creating trust for digital technology. So we need robust human rights and governance frameworks that will build trust on data use and on the technologies themselves and will minimize the risk. Data was discussed quite extensively, and especially our speakers from the big technological companies, they underlined that there are no standards. There are not interoperability standards. there are no guidelines for ensuring privacy, security, and ownership. Each company or a country, they have a framework, some framework, but there is no guidance for this. The farmers' associations and the NGO called for co-ownership of the data between the farmers and the industry. And the use of the data is extremely important. And that was also discussed on the first webinar of the series that focused on marketing. Another interesting insight was related to the big data, machine learning and artificial intelligence. It was underlined, it was somehow a surprise that in food and agriculture, we don't talk about big data. We talk about metadata. And this is because we have data from, let's say, different sources. We have scientific data, biological data, economic data, data about preferences, and nutrients, and transport costs, etc. And when I heard Raul talking about his algorithm, I thought that yes, the big data requirements in agriculture, and especially when we put nutrition, are extremely significant. So this is also a very important challenge for data governance. One has to find the right balance between the amount and composition of the data that is needed and the rules that shape the collection and the use of the data. On artificial intelligence, there were some ideas that we have to link with ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, as they have specific working groups on the implementation of artificial intelligence for health and the environment. So this is another entry point when we talk about nutrition and digital technology. And of course, we talked a lot in the high-level dialogue about the digital divide, the need for connectivity and infrastructure, but also the need to upgrade the skill sets of everyone. And this also came into the discussion on the second webinar we had in this series. Now this is a quick picture of the digital divide. So you can see on that that the divide exists between developed and developing countries, rural and urban areas, and between men and women. Susan mentioned that in her presentation. So for example, look at Denmark, has the highest connectivity rate with about 90% of both rural men and women using the internet. And virtually there is no rural-urban gap. If you see a developing country, Bolivia, for example, we have 15% of rural women that use the internet, compared with about 55% of urban women. If you see Niger, we have only 0.6% of rural women that use the internet. During the dialogue, there was another gap that it was revealed. The people from Microsoft and the IBM, they talk that there are no big data engineers in agriculture, even in developed countries. So we have a gap in the skill set, even at that level. Agronomists even in developed countries are not trained in managing big data. And this is another challenge that we will have to overcome. Now let's go back to the platform, and I would like to show to you again the structure we are working on and how we are trying to create an entry point for everyone. And in these, associations and communities of practice will be very important. Now, as I said in the first webinar, in designing the platform, we try to address the trade-off between a light structure and an inclusiveness. So for governments, we have the Intergovernmental Representatives Group. It will lie at the heart of the initiative and will be composed by 27 FAO members. The advisory committee will be formed by experts from international organizations, but also from the stakeholders. And the objective will be to carry out the analysis and provide the evidence, but also recommendations and guidelines to be discussed by the Intergovernmental Representatives Group. And the multi-stakeholder forum, it will be an online forum open to everyone at national and local level to ensure inclusion and bottom-up information flow. Now, we don't have a problem in selecting the FAO members because our members will select themselves. They are organized in regional groups and they will decide themselves which countries will represent the regional groups. The most important challenge is at the yellow boxes. So for the advisory committee, for example, what experts do we include and how we decide who will participate. The same thing goes for the online multi-stakeholder forum. How do we include everyone? And this is where associations and communities of practice become extremely important in linking this initiative with people and the various stakeholders. So, I would like to give you an example related to the private sector. Which agribusiness company we approach, or in the civil society, which non-governmental organization we ask to participate. So we thought of asking advice from the private sector mechanism or the civil society mechanism of the Committee on World Food Security, because they have already created a mechanism to represent their sector. So we don't have to start from zero. So for the private sector in the CFS, it is the International Agri-Food Network that facilitates coordination and is the focal point for the private sector in the committee. And they have already organized themselves in a digital agricultural association. So this is very good for us. We can approach the experts through the same association that works on the Committee on World Food Security, and they can participate in the platform with experts, with real experts that know about digital agriculture. Communities of practice also will be extremely important for linking the platform with the multi-stakeholders. And in FAO, we have the e-agriculture, which is the FAO's community on practice that can help a lot in populating the multi-stakeholder forum. So the e-agriculture community has now above 14,000 participants and members across the world who exchange information and ideas on the use of digital technologies for sustainable agricultural development. Another example is the CGIAR platform for big data in agriculture, which includes 6 communities of practice. One for data-driven agriculture, crop modeling, livestock, geospatial data, socioeconomic data, and interoperability. So this is extremely important for us because if we have to deal with big data, we can call the CGIAR platform for big data in agriculture to provide insights and to facilitate knowledge sharing for big data issues. So across the United Nations and other organizations, other intergovernmental organizations, there are many approaches to achieve digital cooperation. And we believe that communities of practice provide very good collaboration spaces and many opportunities to facilitate knowledge sharing and work in the International Platform for Digital Food and Agriculture. And we will be very happy to also be in a position to discuss digital technology applications on nutrition. And the UN Standing Committee on Nutrition is already a catalyst for sharing their knowledge and best practices in this area. And with this, I will close my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, George, for being with us for the second time, in fact, and also for following this webinar, this series of 4 webinars. Thanks again for the overview you provided, and also for your ability to weave through the series of webinars we have done so far. And thanks for your kind words about UNSCN, obviously, that we have functioned as a kind of facilitator and accelerator for the use of digital technologies in nutrition world. So happy to link up there. But maybe before we discuss a bit more about the opportunities to link up more with the International Platform for Digital Agriculture, I understand there were a few questions in the Q&A box that have been answered so far. And a question to Bindu, but also a question to Jenny. So maybe Bin, I saw you have been answering some of the questions in the chat function. Are you willing to give us a short overview of the question and answer? I think that's interesting to read in the floor, to listen to the other speakers as well.
You mean for the question that been addressed me by Ms. Yindu Sharma?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the question is, there was low nutrition awareness among SMEs and consumers, and are there any data on how has the production translated into consumption? Did the product also include nutrition actions that increase nutrition sensitivity, for example, nutrition education or behavior change interventions to both SMEs and consumers? So my answer is that this product itself, our product, only addresses the nutrition awareness of SMEs in the 3 countries, Ghana, Kenya, and Vietnam. And we try to build a case, not a business case, but an argument, trying to persuade SMEs that produce nutritious food or changing their way towards more nutrition sensitive processing procedures can bring good profits. So, and we also try to build capacities of SMEs in how to produce those nutritious food and general business skills. And for the consumer side, in this product, we don't address it, but in the general discussion, the stakeholder workshop, or the meetings, we involve government agencies and trade associations. And every time we emphasize that the awareness of consumers need also to be changed so that the demand side of the nutritious food also increase. So this can be a match. And of course, FAO has been doing nutrition education to increase the nutrition awareness in consumers for a long time. And for the last question, I'm not sure, I don't understand very well what does it mean by how the production translated into consumption. I guess it means how much the food produced by SMEs we involve goes to the local production. We don't measure those data very in detail, but in our practice, we choose the SMEs and the associations that represent SMEs, those SMEs that produce food for local consumption, not SMEs that produce some economic products like coffee or something that is much more export oriented. We aim to benefit the local population. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. And I spotted another question as well for Jenny. I believe that one was not yet answered, right? So the question is if Harvest Plus is focusing on zinc consumption alone, or is it also expanding to other nutrients? And are there any data available on how farmers are taking up these messages?
Yes, a great question. Thank you.
Can I interrupt? Can maybe the speakers, the panelists, switch on the videos? It's nicer to see your faces while you're talking. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. So I gave some examples on zinc, but we also are very concerned about iron and vitamin A consumption. So they're the three major nutrients of concern that we operate with. And then, yes, we do have good data about farmer adoption. So the 42 million consumers that I talked about before is primarily farming households. So I mean, that's a testament enough to show that farmers are really interested in nutrient-enriched crops and biofortification. And one of the main reasons for that is that the consumer market, so market demand for nutritious, healthy, clean label and more natural type food is really growing. So this is one major reason why farmers are willing to be involved in biofortification. And I'm very happy to share the data that we do have on that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I didn't see any specific questions for Raoul or Susan, but I did see a more overall overarching question just now. Of course, acknowledging the quality of all your presentations, and then moving on to the 4 episodes in general. And the question is how we can capture all the learning and maximize contributions and mitigate risks while we are already in this digital nutrition world. Do we need a full knowledge management approach to digital nutrition? Is it a question or is it an exclamation mark? So maybe you can, Susan or Raoul, or both of you can react to that before we move to other speakers as well. But since you have not spoken yet in this round, I'd like to move to you. Who can I give the floor, Raoul or Susan? Who's first?
Susan, go ahead.
I don't think I understood the question, but if I can paraphrase it, I think she's asking how can we manage all this information that is coming up, digital information. And I think documenting it even through webinars as this one is a good way of management, because once the information has been passed out, definitely it will be retained by the listeners. And we have also the journal, which has come out, the UN SEN 45. It's a way of managing this information, and it will be there for the years to come.
Thanks. Thanks also for reminding us about our famous publication, of course. Raoul, you wanted to come in as well?
Oh, sorry. Look at the digital boy talking on mute. Sorry. Yes, so about knowledge management for this, I mean, I think nowadays the same approach to any digital, for any knowledge management issue is about organizing information well, and on one side, and that's of course it's a digital solution, but that requires also a keeper, someone who is able to handle that, to manage that, to contact everyone, and so on. But there are two key points here as well when we talk about knowledge management in general, which is about the knowledge that is implicit in the people and knowledge that is explicit. And there is a round of knowledge that should keep rolling on that sense. There are people who know something implicitly because they know how to do it, because they studied, because they research. That knowledge is very important, that we find somehow the way of making it explicit, of putting that into lessons learned, into something that is digestible, not a huge amount of information that nobody can digest, but just like key lessons learned about what are how can we entice SMEs to get into this and these crops? How can we know easily what a biofortified crop is and how does it work, etc., etc. So having those pearls of knowledge explicitly taken out of that implicit knowledge, and then again ensure that that explicit knowledge goes back into implicit knowledge to the general people. And I think with a digital approach to that, like a central library where all that information is stored, it's easy to read, it's easy to find, that's something that we should start looking into, definitely.
Thanks, Raul. And in fact, you listed quite a few elements of knowledge management and how this can be facilitated by and through digital tools and digital technologies, implicit and explicit knowledge, and then also weaving it back into big data, or rather mega data, when you look at the complexity of agriculture. And of course, we as nutritionists, we like to then even complicate matters more, because agriculture should be about healthy diets and nutrition, of course. Yeah, at least from the nutrition point of view, apart from all the other functions of agriculture. I think we, again and again, we come to the digital divide and the access to knowledge and the access of information. And if it's open to people who actually generate and use the knowledge, or rather closed, and what are the the privacy issues related to that, as also explained again by George. So George, I would like to come back to you as well. We were discussing a bit just now how to capture all the learning and the maximizing the contributions of all, making implicit knowledge more explicit. And you also referred already to UNSCN as a, and this group as a potential community of practice that could feed into the platform. Have you, from, of course, our point of view as UNSCN and as nutrition community, as to say, would you have any advice for us how to go about that? How to continue with this COP, and then linking up with you or with Val?
Thank you, Stineke. You mentioned that you are nutritionists, and putting this together with what Raul said about data, it's a mission impossible. I got a bit frustrated because I'm an economist, and economists normally reduce things to very few variables. So on full knowledge management approach and how we deal with big data or mega data, for me personally, it's extremely difficult, because the tools of economic analysis there are made for small data, not for big data. Let's say some thousand variables. We want our data to be well behaved. We like nice trends. We don't like outliers. We worry a lot about sampling. And I think Raul put it very well when he said we need somebody to manage the data, or we have to learn ourselves how to manage this data. So there is an important, we talk about the digital divide and we look at the data in rural and urban areas, but we forget the digital gap. We are part of the digital gap ourselves. Now on the community of practice, I think the communities of practice are a great thing. It is a great collaboration space. Within such a community, there is a lot of rich information and ideas that are exchanged. I look at the e-agriculture community of practice in FAO, and I can already pinpoint associations or farmers organizations that they have really they are on the forefront of the applications of digital technologies on agriculture, and they can give us not only a list of priorities of the constraints they face and the challenges, but they can give us also knowledge. So if you think about starting a digital nutrition community of practice, I think my first advice is to get everyone in, to get the technology people together with the nutrition people, but also the private sector. There was a lot of talk on the first webinar on how the private sector worked with data in the context of marketing. I think it is very important that every stakeholder is taking part in a community of practice, so that we can develop a common understanding. And this would be a great link for the international platform for digital food and agriculture. Now, already the standing committee is a group of international organizations. So there are a lot of dimensions in the problems and the issues you deal. It may be that for a certain issue related to digital technology, FAO could be the actual client or outlet. In other cases, it may be the World Health Organization. It is a complex environment, and I think as we're working on it, then we will be able to see things clearly and in a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That's very helpful. We have also come at the moment that we have to close this webinar, but I will not close it before I share with you the final ideas for follow-up of this series of webinar. After having participated in this series of 4, and after having done this wonderful publication about nutrition in a digital world, I think as nutrition community of practice, or nutrition in a digital world community of practice, we could have 2 functions. One could be, let's use the word digest part of that very complex information, nutrition information, and the complexity of the multisectorality of nutrition into, let's say, digestible bits and bytes for a platform like the International Platform for Digital Food and Agriculture. So we could come forward with clear knowledge and possibly also clear questions or clear issues that we have kind of digested already in our community of practice, and bring them forward to the International Platform for Digital Food and Agriculture. And another one, of course, as you said, George, is to bring people together, bring several stakeholders together. And that's exactly a function the UNSCN has, a platform for substantive debate. So that is something we could surely do. We will have to think about, of course, who actually would be part of the COP, of the community of practice. I can't speak to that at this very moment. So having said that, I think these 2 objectives for a COP could be very helpful. I am most willing to work on that as UNSCN in the coming months, and come forward with a proposal. Having said this, I need to say one final thing, or in fact 2 final things. First of all, UNSCN will continue, but it will not use its current name anymore. We will move into being UN Nutrition as from 1st of January 2021. So keep that word in mind, keep that new name in your mind, and look out for our messages where we will further communicate about UN Nutrition. But you can already look us up. We are there on the website with a preliminary information, unnutrition.org. So that was my pre-final message. And my final message is that I also found out that we are, more or less 1 week ahead of this holiday season. So please enjoy your holiday season, and I hope to see you back in the new year. So with that, I adjourn the meeting, the webinar, and thank you so much for all your wonderful presentations, your wonderful participation, and your interesting questions throughout the 4 webinars. Thank you, and I'd love to see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.